So the Productivity Commission was one of the major events that affect the way superannuation could work in the future. What were you seeing as some of those impacts that we could see coming through?
The Productivity Commission had this massive job to look at the system and understand, especially the default superannuation system, and work out what's working, what's not. They came out with two things which aren't really working, and they're dead right. One is you've got too many people with too many accounts. You've got too many people with 3, 4, 5, 6 accounts, and there's really no reason to have that. The other thing is, some people when they start a new job, they're defaulting into a fund that's not very good. So we need to work out a way that if someone's going to default into a fund, they only default into good funds. One of the problems with multiple accounts is we keep making new ones. So we've got to work out how to stop making new ones. And one of their recommendations makes a lot of sense. And that is, when you start a new job, you don't start a new superannuation fund. You don't start a new superannuation fund by default. Ideally, you want to keep your old one, so that where you were contributing to with your old employer, you keep contributing to that fund. So that would deal with the multiple accounts quite quickly. That presents an interesting structure to the industry, because that means really you only default once, and that is when you get your first job. That is when you're 16, working at Macca's, or working in a restaurant or a pub. So that's really the only time you would need to default, and in some ways that's the hardest part to work out. How do you work out what you default to at that time? And no matter what the solution is, we need to make sure that that fund that you default into is a really good fund. Best in Show tries to deal with that. There may be some related models that achieve a similar thing without some of the issues that the Best in Show has.
Are there any areas of the Productivity Commission's recommendations which you feel are not going to work in the best interests of members?
There is a potential that if you choose a Best in Show, a list of 10, and that's heavily promoted throughout the industry, then every other fund might really struggle. And there's going to be a lot of members who are still in those funds. And if those funds really struggle, members in those funds may not be reaching good outcomes. And it's going to be really difficult, I don't think it's really helpful either, to end up with just 10 funds. Or at least 10 strong, sustainable funds. I think ideally we want to end up with a model where we have 20, 30 or 40 really strong funds. There might be some funds which focus on particular industries, in particular insurance which works for particular industries, whereas there might be others which are broader. There might be some funds which have a strong focus on providing really good retirement solutions. There might be some funds which focus on using data about members to really understand their members well and help them understand how they can grow their super and end up with a better retirement outcome. There might be some funds which are choosing to be low cost. If you have 10, I think you're cutting down options. APRA has their outcomes test, and APRA is saying to remain a MySuper, you really have to be delivering solid outcomes for members. So we want to have that test, and if a fund is not doing that, then they probably need to be rolling into another fund. This industry at the end of the day is not about the funds, is it? This industry is about the members and good long-term retirement outcomes for members. And whatever comes out of the Productivity Commission, that has got to be the focus. And if that's what we end up with, if we end up with a model and funds which are truly focused on members, then that will be a great outcome.